They say money reveals who people really are. After my billionaire grandfather died, my own parents sued me for his fortune. They called me a thief, a liar, a disgrace. But when the judge opened the case file, the courtroom fell quiet. He frowned and said, "Why are you sitting there? The charges are actually against your parents." Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us at True Experience. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to stay connected with more real-life tales of betrayal and justice. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community across the USA, Canada, and around the world. Quick note before we begin. What you're about to hear is one man's account of his life. Names and some details have been changed. This story involves family conflict and legal matters. My name is Ethan. I'm 45 years old now. The courtroom moment I just described happened 3 years ago, but the story begins much earlier, when I was 17. My grandfather, Thomas Whitmore, built his wealth the old way. Real estate, careful investments, decades of patient work. He wasn't flashy. Drove the same Buick for 15 years. Wore the same brown jacket to church every Sunday. But he was sharp with numbers and even sharper about character. I grew up in Denver. My father worked in sales, never quite making enough. My mother stayed home, always comparing our life to others. They weren't cruel people, but they were restless, always wanting more, always looking at what they didn't have. My grandfather lived 2 streets over. Every Saturday morning from age 7 onward, I walked to his house. We'd sit at his kitchen table, and he'd teach me things. How to balance a checkbook, how compound interest works, how to read a property deed. He never talked down to me. Just showed me the papers, explained the numbers, let me ask questions. My parents didn't visit him much. Too busy, they said, but I was there every week. When I turned 18, my grandfather paid for my college. Business degree from University of Colorado. My parents were pleased about that. They told their friends often enough, but they never thanked him to his face that I saw. I graduated in 2002, got a job at a property management firm. Nothing glamorous. I worked my way up slowly. My grandfather would have lunch with me once a month, always asking about work, about what I was learning. In 2007, I married Linda. Good woman, elementary school teacher. We had a small wedding. My parents complained it wasn't fancy enough. My grandfather gave a quiet toast, shook my hand, told me he was proud. Linda and I tried for children. It didn't happen. We saw doctors, spent money we didn't have on treatments. Nothing worked. My mother made comments, said maybe Linda wasn't the right choice, said I should have married someone younger, healthier. Linda heard those comments. They hurt her. My grandfather never said a word about it, just asked how we were doing, listened when we needed to talk. By 2012, we'd stopped trying for children. We were tired, sad, but we had each other, and that had to be enough. My grandfather invited us to dinner that year, just the 3 of us. He told us family wasn't about blood. It was about showing up. He said we'd built something good together, and that mattered. I remember Linda cried that night. Good tears. My parents rarely called during those years. They were busy with their own lives. My father had changed jobs twice. My mother had opinions about everything but time for very little. In 2015, my grandfather had his first stroke. Minor, the doctor said, but he was 84. Things change after 84. I started visiting him 3 times a week, helped him with errands, fixed things around his house. Linda came with me often. We'd make dinner, play cards, sit on his porch. My parents visited twice that I know of. Both times they asked if he needed anything. He said no. They left after 20 minutes each time. In 2017, my grandfather called me to his house on a Tuesday afternoon. He had papers spread across the dining room table. His lawyer was there, a man named Henry Castellano, practiced estate law for 40 years. My grandfather told me he was updating his will. He wanted me to know what was in it. He'd thought carefully. Most of his estate would go to me. Not all. He had charitable causes, some distant cousins, but the bulk of it, the properties, the investments, the accounts. I asked why. He said because I'd shown up, because I cared without asking for anything, because he trusted me to handle it properly. I didn't know what to say. I thanked him. He waved his hand like it was obvious. He told me not to mention it to my parents yet. He'd tell them himself when the time was right. I agreed. That conversation stayed with me. I didn't feel entitled to anything. I just felt the weight of his trust. My grandfather stayed healthy enough for 3 more years. We kept our routine. Dinners, cards, conversations on the porch. Linda and I moved into a house closer to him in 2019, so we could help more. My parents called him on his birthday and Christmas. That was about it. In October 2020, my grandfather had a second stroke, larger this time. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I was there every day. Linda brought him books. We sat with him even when he couldn't talk much. My parents visited once. My mother cried. My father held her hand. They stayed an hour. On their way out, my mother asked me if I knew anything about his finances. I said he had a lawyer and everything was organized. She nodded and left. My grandfather died on November 3rd, 2020. He was 89 years old. The funeral was small. People from his church, some business associates, Henry Castellano, a few neighbors. My parents wore black and stood in the front row. They looked appropriately sad. The will reading happened 1 week later. Henry's office, dark with furniture. Coffee nobody touched. Henry read through the document. Charitable donations. A few small gifts to cousins. Then the main estate. Properties valued around $38 million total. Investment accounts. Liquid assets. All to me, with clear instructions on how to manage it responsibly. The room went silent. My mother's face changed. My father stared at Henry like he'd misheard. "This can't be right," my mother said. Henry said it was exactly right. Witnessed, notarized, filed properly. My father asked why. Why would everything go to me and not them? They were his son and daughter-in-law. They had rights. Henry said my grandfather's wishes were clear and legally sound. My mother turned to me. She asked if I knew about this. I said yes. She called me a snake. Said I'd manipulated an old man, poisoned him against his own family. I didn't argue. I just sat there. They left, didn't say goodbye. 2 months later, I received legal papers. My parents were suing me. They claimed undue influence. Said I'd isolated my grandfather, controlled his decisions, stolen what rightfully belonged to them. They wanted the will overturned and the estate split. Linda held my hand when I read the filing. I felt numb. Henry said we'd fight it. He had documentation. Decades of records showing my grandfather's mental competence. Medical evaluations. Letters he'd written explaining his reasoning. Testimony from people who'd witnessed everything. The case moved slowly. Legal cases always do. Depositions, motions, court dates that got rescheduled. My parents gave interviews to a local news outlet. Said I was a disgrace. A thief who'd stolen from his own family. I didn't respond publicly. Henry advised silence. During those 2 years, I managed my grandfather's properties as he'd instructed, made repairs, collected rents, honored his charitable commitments. I didn't touch the money for myself beyond what was necessary to live and manage the estate. Linda kept teaching. We kept our same house, our same cars. Nothing flashy, nothing that would feed the narrative my parents were building. Then in early 2023, Henry called me. He said my parents' lawyer had made a mistake. During discovery, they'd submitted financial records that didn't match their story. Henry had found something. For years, my parents had been receiving money from my grandfather. Loans, they were called. $30,000 here, $50,000 there. Always with promissory notes. Always with terms for repayment. They'd never repaid a single dollar. Henry kept digging. There were documents my grandfather had kept. Letters from my parents asking for money. Promises they'd made. My grandfather had given them over $400,000 across 15 years. He'd never mentioned it to me. More than that, My parents had opened a credit card in my grandfather's name in 2018, used it, racked up charges. He discovered it and paid it off quietly. There was a police report he'd filed, and then withdrawn. He hadn't wanted to prosecute his own son. Henry brought this to the judge. Filed a countersuit. Fraud. Elder financial abuse. Exploitation. The trial date finally arrived. April 2023. I sat on one side of courtroom with Henry. My parents sat on the other with their lawyer. The judge was a woman named Patricia Hendricks. Late 50s. Reputation for no-nonsense rulings. She reviewed the case file that morning before we started. Took her time. Flipped through page after page. Then she looked up. Looked right at me. Frowned. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "why are you sitting there?" I didn't understand the question. She turned to my parents. "The charges are actually against your parents." The courtroom went quiet. Judge Hendricks said she reviewed all evidence submitted. The countersuit had merit. The original claim did not. She asked my parents' lawyer if he'd reviewed the financial documents his own clients had submitted. He looked pale, said he'd need to confer with his clients. The judge gave him 5 minutes. I watched my parents huddle with their lawyer. My mother was crying. My father looked angry. When we reconvened, their lawyer asked to withdraw the case, requested no countersuit proceed, said his clients wanted to settle privately. Judge Hendricks asked me what I wanted. I looked at Henry. He nodded. I told the judge I didn't want money from them. I just wanted them to stop claiming I'd stolen anything. I wanted the record clear. Judge Hendricks made her ruling. Case dismissed. No ground for their claim. Public record would reflect that. She ordered them to pay court costs. Then she did something I didn't expect. She asked if I wanted to pursue the fraud charges. I said no. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, said the record would stand. They'd attempted to sue over an estate they'd already exploited. That would be documented. My parents left through a side door, didn't look at me. Henry shook my hand outside the courthouse, said my grandfather would be proud. Linda was waiting in the car. She hugged me. We drove home in silence. I still manage my grandfather's properties. I've sold a few, invested carefully, supported the charities he cared about. Linda and I live comfortably, but simply, we've set up scholarships, funded medical research, done what we think he'd want. My parents sent a letter 6 months after the trial. No apology. Just said they hope we could move past it someday. I didn't respond. I think about my grandfather often, about those Saturday mornings at his kitchen table, the way he taught without preaching, the way he noticed who showed up. Money didn't reveal who people were. It just made visible what was already there. I was there. My parents weren't. That was the difference. Not dramatic, not complicated. Just years of small choices that added up. I'm 45 now. No children of my own. But Linda and I have built something good. We've honored what we were trusted with. We've shown up. That's all my grandfather ever asked. If this story spoke to you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life accounts of family, betrayal, and justice. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We read every single one. Thanks for listening, friends.